You ever find yourself sitting there, asking the universe, if there's a God, then why so much suffering? It's a huge question and one we all grapple with, whether or not we realize it. Maybe you've heard someone say, if God is real and He's good, then why does He allow such evil to exist? This isn't just a philosophical debate, this is the heart-wrenching stuff we experience every day. Pain, injustice, tragedy, it's personal. And honestly, if you've ever been angry at the idea of God because of it, you're not alone. Let's be real here. So let's imagine that moment where we could just face God. What would we say? Some would cry out, why do innocent children suffer, or why allow natural disasters to devastate lives? These are real questions, deeply painful, no easy answers. In fact, the world itself is a complex blend of beauty and brutality. Flowers bloom, rivers flow, but so do wildfires rage and diseases spread. It's what some people call beauty and barbed wire. The combination of wonder and terror in the world is the paradox we live with every day.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
But here's the thing, does this mean God is evil? Let's think about this. If we're wrestling with the concept of good versus evil, we must be measuring it against something, right? When we say that's wrong, we imply that there's a standard of right. And if we're honest, that standard must come from somewhere. A world with no higher standard, one that's purely random, doesn't really allow for something like good or evil. Things would simply be. But you and I both know that when we see suffering, we feel in our gut that something is wrong, that it shouldn't be that way. That sense of morality points to a deeper truth, that there's more than randomness behind this universe. Now, you might be thinking, that doesn't really solve the problem of pain fair. But what if we're looking at it wrong? What if the question isn't, why does God allow evil, but rather, what is God doing in the midst of evil? The Christian perspective claims that God isn't distant from human suffering, rather, He chose to experience it deeply, personally. The story of Jesus shows a God who not only watched suffering, but endured it, who entered into our pain out of compassion. A God who chose to stand in our place, on the cross, enduring betrayal, injustice, and the very suffering we rage against. And if this is true, what does that say about His nature? Stay with me, because in the next part, we're diving into some of the deepest reasons people turn away from God. We'll explore why the concept of justice matters so much in our lives and why, without it, life feels unbearable, unfair. Let's talk about justice. If you've ever been wronged or seen someone you care about treated unfairly, you know the deep H for things to be set right. It's a universal feeling, a belief that justice matters, that things should be fair. But think about this: in a random, godless universe, there's no inherent fair, yet here we are, every one of us, wired with a drive to see justice done. It's like this need for justice is embedded in our DNA, crying out that right and wrong actually matter. Here's something to chew on. Justice, when you think about it, isn't just a human preference. It's something we hold on to because we believe it's real, that it should be there. And the Christian view proposes that this sense of justice points back to a God who is inherently just, the ultimate standard of good. If we feel injustice so deeply, it's because it reflects something of His own nature. Think about it, would we even notice injustice if there were no standard of justice imprinted in our very souls? Now, some people argue that we can define good and evil without God. But there's a catch when we try to ground these ideas in things like human flourishing or well-being. We're actually skipping a step. Why is human flourishing good? Who decided? Without an ultimate standard outside of ourselves, we're just declaring something is good because we feel like it is. But if goodness is just our preference, then it's just an opinion. Nothing more. This brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all. Is there a chance that one day ultimate justice will be served? Could it be that the God who created this world will, in the end, set things right? Because if we only have this life, then most people who've ever faced injustice will never see it resolved. They won't see justice. And here's the kicker: if there is no hope for justice, what does that say about our cries for it now? If God is real, Christianity offers a radical answer that justice will come not in this life, but eventually. That every pain, every wrong, every tear will be accounted for. And that's where hope comes in. Hope that the unfairness of life won't be the final word. That there is a future where justice will be done. But maybe you're still thinking, that sounds nice, but why doesn't God fix it all now? Well, that's a fair question. But consider this: real justice includes mercy. What if God is waiting to give people a chance to turn away from wrong and make things right? What if his delay in judgment is actually his way of showing mercy? Just like we crave justice, we all, deep down, hope for mercy too. Keep watching, because in the final part, we'll explore the possibility of a world made new, where all the pain, suffering, and evil we see today is ultimately transformed. This is where it all comes together. Imagine a world where evil doesn't have the last word, where all the pain we experience now is somehow undone. It sounds impossible, maybe even naive. But what if this is the very heart of the Christian message? What if God's answer to evil isn't just fixing this world temporarily, but creating something completely new? Christians believe that through Jesus there is a promise of a world remade, a future where suffering, death, and evil are gone for good. This isn't about escaping reality, it's about redeeming it. Imagine every hurt you've experienced, every injustice made right, every sorrow turned to joy. This idea of a world made whole touches on the deepest human longing. We all want a happy ending, something that redeems the struggles we go through. And if God is who Christians say he is, then that's exactly what he has in mind. Maybe you're wondering, why not just fix this world now? Why does God allow so much pain in the meantime? That's a profound question. And the answer might be that this life, as it is, has a purpose and opportunity for us to experience freedom, to choose, to grow, and even to make mistakes. Could it be that the pain we experience now has a place in a bigger story? That the freedom we have, which sometimes leads to evil, is actually a gift? At the end of the day, here's the Christian message: God doesn't ignore suffering. He entered it, and he doesn't let evil win. He has a plan to bring about a world where justice and love reign fully. A world where we don't just exist, but where we experience life as it was meant to be. So next time someone says, God must be evil because of all the suffering in the world, maybe hit them with this: what if, just maybe, God's allowing this broken world to lead us to something far better than we can imagine? What if the longing for justice and peace we all feel is actually a clue, a signpost pointing us to a future he's inviting us to be a part of? Thank you for watching. And remember, this question of God and evil isn't just about answering a debate. It's about finding hope, purpose, and a deeper understanding of our place in this world. If this resonated with you, let's keep exploring life's biggest questions. Join the community. Let's figure this out together. Here's a question that's probably crossed your mind: if God is good and loving, why allow human freedom when it often leads to pain? Wouldn't a world where people can't choose to harm each other be better? This is one of the most profound questions in understanding the problem of evil, and it cuts right to the core of why freedom exists in the first place. Imagine a world without choice, a world where every action, every thought, is perfectly controlled to ensure no one can ever do wrong. It might sound appealing at first, but think about it: without choice, there's no real love, no genuine relationships, no meaningful actions. Love, at its essence, requires freedom. It's only real if we have the ability to choose otherwise. Think about the relationships in your own life. Would they mean anything if the other person had no choice but to care about you? Would it feel fulfilling to love someone who could only respond because they had no alternative? This is where things get tricky. The very freedom that makes love possible also opens the door for harm. Freedom means we can make choices, good, bad, and everything in between. And when humans misuse that freedom, when they choose selfishness, hate, and cruelty, that's where suffering comes in. But is the answer to eliminate freedom altogether, to prevent every possibility of harm? If God values love and meaningful relationships, then allowing freedom, even when it's misused, becomes a necessary part of a world that allows genuine connections. Consider this: if God were to prevent all harm, He would also have to take away all freedom. But instead, what if God's plan is to work through that freedom, using it as a way to shape us, to allow us to grow, to choose love over hate? That's a hard truth to accept, because it means we have to look at our own responsibility in the world. We have to face the fact that much of the suffering we see comes from human actions, from choices made by people like you and me. But let's push deeper. Why would God allow natural evils, like earthquakes or diseases, to exist? Surely these don't come from human choices. And if God is loving, wouldn't He create a world without such things? Here's a different perspective. What if the very forces that allow life to exist, like tectonic plates shifting to create stable land masses or biological processes that sometimes go wrong, are essential to the world we live in? We can't have mountains without tectonic shifts, nor can we have complex life without biological processes that occasionally lead to illness. In other words, the same forces that give us life also carry risks. This doesn't solve the problem of pain. It's still difficult to accept. But it does suggest that the world's design, with all its risks, is balanced in a way that allows life to flourish. And when tragedy strikes, we're forced to confront our own limits, our need for something beyond ourselves. It's in those moments of crisis that many people find themselves reaching out to God, looking for answers, meaning, and ultimately hope. Stay tuned, because next we're going to explore what it actually means to live in a world where we have both beauty and suffering, and how that could point us to a purpose beyond what we can see. Here's where things get personal. The world we live in is what some call a mixed bag. There's immense beauty, but also immense pain. We're drawn to the beauty, the love, the joy, the thrill of discovery, the wonder of nature. Yet we're equally confronted by the pain, loss, heartbreak, and injustice. And we often ask ourselves, why is this the reality we're given? The fact that we're even asking why suggests something profound. It suggests that we believe life should make sense, that there should be a purpose. But let's ask ourselves, where does this drive for meaning come from? Evolutionary psychology might say it's just a survival mechanism, a way to keep us going. But is it really that simple? Or does our search for meaning actually point us to something beyond ourselves? Think about it. In a purely material world, one where everything is random and accidental, there's no real reason to expect meaning. Things simply happen. And yet, humanity has always felt a deep desire for purpose, a belief that our lives matter, that there's a reason for our existence. This isn't something we can easily dismiss as a mere accident of biology. The more we try to brush it off, the more persistent it becomes. This brings us to an intriguing idea. What if the mix of beauty and suffering in our world is designed to draw us towards something greater? What if the beauty we experience hints at the goodness of a creator, while the suffering reminds us that this world as it is not the final chapter? Christianity suggests exactly this. It proposes that our world is not an end in itself, but a journey, a process through which we come to understand who God is and who we are meant to be. It's not an easy answer, it's not a quick fix. But it does offer a framework for making sense of our experiences. Consider this: if there is a God who created us with the capacity for love, growth, and even suffering, then every part of our experience has the potential for meaning. The beauty points us to God's goodness, while the pain pushes us to seek Him out, to ask questions, to dig deeper. And what if, in the end, both the beauty and the suffering are meant to shape us, to prepare us for something far beyond what we can imagine? Let's keep going, because in the next part, we're going to confront the hardest question of all. How can we trust that a God who allows suffering can also be a God of love? Trust. It's the foundation of every relationship. But how do you trust a God who lets suffering exist? This is the question that keeps so many people from believing in God, and it's completely understandable. How can a loving God allow us to go through such pain? This is where Christianity offers something unique. Instead of presenting a distant, untouchable deity, it shows us a God who willingly entered into human suffering. According to Christian belief, God didn't stay far away from our pain. Instead, He chose to walk among us, to live a life like ours, to experience rejection, betrayal, and ultimately death. This isn't just a story, it's a profound statement about who God is. It says that God understands suffering not from a distance, but from within, from experience. Think about this for a moment. If God was willing to go through suffering for us, doesn't that change how we see Him? It suggests that suffering isn't meaningless, that even the darkest moments have a purpose. The Christian message claims that through Jesus, God offers us not just sympathy, but a promise that the pain of this life isn't the end. That there's a future where every wrong is made right, where every tear is wiped away. It's a challenging thought because it requires us to trust in something beyond our immediate understanding. But if you're open to it, it's also a comforting one. It means that no matter what you go through, you're not alone. That there's a purpose, even when you can't see it. So next time someone says, "How can you believe in a God who lets bad things happen?" maybe you can answer with this: it's not about ignoring the pain or pretending it doesn't matter. It's about believing in a God who is with us in the pain, who walks with us through it, and who promises that one day it will all make sense. Thank you for going on this journey with us. Life's hardest questions don't have easy answers, but exploring them can lead us to a deeper understanding, a greater sense of purpose, and maybe even a spark of hope. Keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep digging deeper. This concludes our exploration, but it's only the beginning of a larger journey. If this resonated with you, if it made you think or challenged your perspective, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, the search for meaning, justice, and love is universal, and the questions you're asking are worth exploring.